This is an I Am Listening podcast.
One of the significant issues being flagged is that around health and safety. We weren't aware of the extent of the contamination. We weren't aware of the extent of the risk. And I think we and you, the public, now need to have answers.
Welcome to the Kent Politics Podcast.
Hello, I'm Nikki White, Senior News Editor with the KM Media Group, with your weekly roundup of the county's political news. There has been a significant development in the long-running saga over the closure of Galley Hill Road at Swanscombe, which was shut by a catastrophic landslip. 3 years ago, the A226, which links Dartford and Gravesham at Swanscombe, gave way, taking a great chunk out of the road. It sent hundreds of tonnes of chalk tumbling onto an industrial estate below. We heard this week that the local MP Jim Dickson has written to the Roads Minister giving his full support for Kent County Council's bid for money from the government's Structures Fund, which is a £1 billion pot set aside for such repairs. And some extra cash is really needed. The experts reckon it will cost at least £46 million to build a bridge over the affected site. Mr Dickson, who is an affable and likeable chap, has a lot of political skin in the game. He certainly gets the issues and understands the misery that the closure of Galley Hill Road has brought to the community there. If the government doesn't agree that Galley Hill Road warrants the money, Mr Dickson will have to face his electorate, having failed to deliver on the single biggest challenge he has had to face since entering Parliament in July 2024. He has a majority of under 1,200, so one would imagine that if his government fails to support his constituency, he will be in some significant trouble, as the latest polling has Mr Dickson likely to lose the seat to the Conservatives. The deadline for the application for funding passed this week, and KCC's bid is now officially launched. Mr Dickson wrote to the Minister and said, "For 3 years, the people of Swanscombe have lived with the misery, disruption and chaos caused by the collapse of Galley Hill. Residents have endured daily congestion, unreliable journeys, safety concerns from heavy goods vehicles using roads that are wholly unsuitable for them, and the constant frustration of having no clear end in sight. I have heard countless stories from residents about children struggling to get to school on time, workers facing lengthy delays getting to their jobs, residents living in fear that a lorry will hit their house, and businesses facing closure as they grapple with heavily reduced footfall and rising costs." He is understandably keen to get things moving. The government will announce its decision in the autumn, probably in November. Staff at Medway Maritime Hospital are feeling the pressure of increased parking charges after prices rose on August the 1st. Tariffs have gone up across the board, with 2 hours parking up from £2.30 to £2.50, 3 hours from £3.50 to £4.50, and up to 5 hours rising from £5.80 to £7. A full day used to cost £9.20 but will now set you back £15. It's enough of a hit for patients and visitors, but staff at the hospital who have spoken with Kent Online say this increase means many are considering their careers and could leave the service. Some are already taking jobs in pubs because the pay is better. One midwife we spoke to said the park and ride bus which is offered isn't a feasible option, as the final service sets off before she's finished her shift. There are limited staff parking permits which are available at a cost for those who are eligible, but the midwife we spoke to says she's forced to park in the same car park as visitors. This charge increase means she'll have to budget an additional £100 on top of the £150 she's already set aside just to go to work. This is on top of the fact that earlier this year bank shifts, which is where staff can pick up extra work for additional pay, saw the rates cut significantly. It has meant many people who regularly took on these extra shifts now don't think it's worth it. The midwife we spoke to says this is making the shifts unsafe as they're short-staffed, and it's forcing them to work outside their specialities. But the charge increase has also lowered morale, and she said staff have already started picking up shifts in pubs or hotels or other jobs they had before they started working at the hospital because they simply aren't making enough as it is. Medway Council's Deputy Leader, Councillor Teresa Murray, who is also a governor of Medway Maritime, said the board hadn't been informed of the charge increase beforehand. She said although there were reasons in favour of it, such as the financial difficulties the hospital is facing, she was requesting a meeting with the hospital's leadership to understand how the decision had been made. Siobhan Callanan, who is the interim chief executive of Medway NHS Foundation Trust, said she understands any price increase can be difficult for patients and visitors. but she said the money would go to cover costs of running the car parks, and any additional funds would be reinvested into care services. She also said staff are highly valued and the hospital remains committed to supporting them wherever possible.
Is there a topic that you would like to be discussed on the Kent Politics podcast? Perhaps you've got a question for one of our panel, or you'd like to comment on a hot topic in local or national government. Get in touch by emailing or sending a voice note to kentpoliticspodcast@thekmgroup.co.uk.
A council leader has said questions need to be answered after a £40 million Harbourside development was rejected by the Secretary of State. The Northfleet Harbourside project near Gravesend had promised to regenerate an overlooked and largely industrial part of North Kent when it was first announced 4 years ago. The plans included shops, restaurants, bars and cafes, a 200-bed hotel, office start-up space, 3,500 new homes and a new 8,000-seat football stadium for Ebbsfleet United. The plans were approved by Gravesham Council back in 2024, but Housing Secretary Angela Rayner has now thrown out the scheme after she examined the reports from a public inquiry held last year. The government has warned the plans would expose future residents to lead pollution. Gravesham Council leader Councillor John Burden says he's disappointed by the decision. Here he is.
The application was refused although it was on brownfield site, a site requiring refurbishment and renewal and new development being put in place. That development we require is something that was built into our local plan. The real concern for us is the refusal. We don't yet know how the applicant will view this refusal. We don't know whether they're going to try and find a way forward to come back with an alternative scheme, a smaller scheme, a different scheme, or whether they're going to walk away with their external investors from abroad because they don't want to work here anymore. They don't want potentially to work in the UK any further because of the long-winded planning process that we have. We decided this as Gravesham Borough Council after quite an extensive review of the application itself. A lot of detailed work went into that review before it was permitted by members. It's taken over 2 years in which to do this review by government and a decision to come down. That is a long programme time for any developer just to stick in with. So I can understand if they want to go somewhere else. However, we have a duty to bring forward the site for development. We have a duty to find a way forward to create new jobs, new housing, and new opportunities for leisure for people of this borough. And we will be doing that. We'll be working with partners to understand the issues on site. One of the significant issues being flagged is that around health and safety. We weren't aware of the extent of the contamination. We weren't aware of the extent of the risk. And I think we and you, the public, now need to have answers. Is that contamination something that is genuinely as widespread as outlined in the report? Or is it more isolated? And what is the detail of that? We need to work with our external partners, like the Environmental Agency, to do the investigation work that we can't do as a local authority. But we need answers to those questions. What is the contamination? Where is the contamination? What degree of contamination? And how do we get rid of it if it is indeed there? And does it have any health effects on our existing or past residents and employees of those local sites that are there today? Does it have an effect on the people in the football club who have watched games over many years in that location? What is the effect? We need to have answers. So we will be making those inquiries of all the agencies involved to get to the bottom of it, and we will let you know the answer to that. I think our local plan will still be moving forward. We're still very hopeful of a positive outcome. But this has created an issue for us, and we will need to investigate and understand more. But we will be working that through, and we will deliver both a new local plan that is fit for purpose for this borough council area, and we will begin submission to government to deal with that. But this scheme, this site, is a great disappointment for refusal. We need to understand all the issues, and we will get to the bottom of it.
Some of Kent's MPs joined firefighters from across Kent for a noisy protest against proposed cuts to services. Around 300 Fire Brigades Union members, their supporters, friends and families turned out at County Hall in Maidstone where they blew horns and waved flags during a mass show of strength. They were there to try to stop plans to slash part-time on-call crew members and shut stations to divert resources to daytime cover. The proposals, which were drawn up by the senior leadership of Kent Fire and Rescue Service, would see the closure of 4 standalone on-call fire stations at Wye, Chilham, Westerham and Cliff. There will be a review in 12 months' time. KFRS also wants to remove the on-call fire engine from 4 of the combined whole-time and on-call fire stations at Herne Bay, Deal, Faversham and Tunbridge Wells. And there's also a proposal to relocate 2 fire engines at night from Dartford and Thameside to create an additional 3 fire engines during the day at stations across the county when demand is higher. In a glimmer of hope, Grain Station has already been saved after review of data, but that too will be examined again in a year. The FBU has said that strike action in Kent is definitely not off the table. The protesters were joined at their rally by Labour MPs Jim Dickson and Sojan Joseph, as well as Conservative MP Helen Whately. Here she is.
I'm really concerned that there may be cuts to my local fire services, particularly in Faversham. Part of the plans are to make there be fewer crews, that will be less support, and particularly when in Faversham we have a special animal rescue service. When that crew is off away, they often are serving the whole of Kent. We really need the backup crews, and that is what is under threat. I think it is absolute madness when we're getting more extremes of weather, we're getting more fires. We've had several fires locally just in the last few days. To be planning to cut the fire service now, it's just crazy.
Sojan Joseph said now was the time to be increasing services, not cutting them.
This worries me because we had average of 32 incidents every year for the last 7 years. Why fire stations had to deal with it? So it is worrying that it's about the public safety. I'm concerned about cutting the service. In fact, we should be putting more services in the rural areas.
But how would the fire authority afford this? Obviously, the concern is if they don't make these cuts, we could see even worse services, even slower reaction time. What needs to be done to ensure our fire services in Kent are adequately funded?
I have written to the ministers, and in their reply, they said, in fact, 4.7% increase for 26-27 in terms of money, and for the next 3 years, there's around 12% increase funding for the fire services in Kent. So it's not just about the money. The chunk of the money coming from the council tax, we are getting more and more houses built, so there will be more council taxes coming in. So we should be putting more service rather than cutting the services.
My gran grew up and lived in Wye. She sees wildfires regularly. Are you worried that we could see more fires that are responded less to in the rural community around Ashford?
Absolutely. The Environment Audit Committee recently did an inquiry about the rising temperature, and the temperature in this part of the country is rising every year. So the rural areas are in more risk. We're getting more and more incidents of fire in rural areas reported. So why is a rural area? We have a railway track to come from Ashford. So any delay, every minute is important when a fire brigade arrive in an incident. So I'm really worried about the rural areas.
The demonstration came ahead of a crunch meeting of the Kent and Medway Fire and Rescue Authority, which was taking place at the time of recording this podcast. You will be able to find out the result at Kent Online, where you can find all our latest political news. Thanks again for joining us this week. As ever, there's more on our politics page at Kent Online, where you can also find details of how to sign up for our weekly newsletter. Head to kentonline.co.uk/newsletters for that. And for even more, tune in to KMTV's Politics Show every Friday at 5 p.m.
Thanks for listening to the Kent Politics Podcast. Don't forget to check out stories throughout the week on the politics page of Kent Online. And you can watch the Kent Politics Show on KMTV every Friday at 5 p.m. or on demand at kmtv.co.uk.
This has been an I Am Listening podcast. For more information, head over to our website, im-listening.co.uk.